If you can join me
Tina,
for 1 second.
could you join me?
Qui nous vient de Hollande.
Tina comes from the Netherlands. She is professor at the Management University of Rotterdam. Before that, for many years, she was a professor at the Utrecht University. She mainly works on class actions from a historic perspective and on the commons. So thank you very much for being with us, Tina, today. So, Tina, you were able to walk around, to listen. So the aim of this report is to tell us what intrigued you, what amazed you during the day. Up to you, Tina. Thank you very much. I think it's better to, I thought, because the keynote was in English this morning, and I realized that there were not so many people with headphones. And so my mother tongue is Dutch.
I noticed that most of you did not use headphones when there was a talk in English, so I guess English is maybe the best to talk right now. Yes, I would like to wrap up, but I also would like to do what professors usually do. They try to make things a bit abstract, but also put things a bit in context. I think that's probably what I'm best at. So I will try to do that. And one of the topics that came up quite regularly during the day, although I must say it was very hard to follow a lot because there was so much going on over here. It was great to see, is the topic of size. And with size, I don't mean growth. I don't mean economic growth. I mean the size of the cooperative in different ways. And I will talk about that in a moment. But first of all, I'm really happy to be here. I'm actually also a member of SMART, but not in Belgium. I'm a member of SMART in the Netherlands. It's not a cooperative yet there. It's extremely small. There's only a few members, but nevertheless, we carry on. And also the enormous difference between SMART in the Netherlands and SMART in Belgium, which counts over 30,000 members, made me think throughout the day about what the role of size and membership in relation to each other can be and should be within the cooperative, not just this cooperative, but also cooperatives of other types, of energy cooperatives, etc. Yeah, there's over 32,000 members of SMART in Belgium, but there's about 300-400 people here, so that's about 1%. That makes you think, doesn't it? And I know the organizers thought, oh, it should have been more. I think it's quite good to have this number of people already here together and to talk about how they cooperate and what their cooperative should look like, where they go in the future. So I don't think you have to be disappointed, but there's 99% left. So next time I hope you need a far bigger location. But this difference between the number of people that's out there and at some point decided to become a SMART member versus you who want to learn about the cooperative, who are most likely very active members in SMART, or at least utilize the services of SMART a lot, that's a huge difference. So let's talk about size, right? Let's talk about size and why it matters for cooperatives in the past, now, and in the future. And as I said, I'm going to make it a little bit abstract, but I'm also going to try to connect it with concrete examples of cooperatives and their specific features, both in the Netherlands and Belgium, particularly in Belgium. So we've been talking about, for example, in the previous session, about how important cooperatives can be for society, for societal change in many different ways. So then we talk about the external effects of cooperatives. And often we're so busy with running the cooperative that we forget about why or what can a cooperative mean to society. SMART, of course, has a history where it matters very much what happens in society. It's all about changing the position of self-employed, how they are treated by Social Security, for example. So SMART really has a reason of existence, basically due to the fact that something has not been arranged well for the people, the members of SMART in the rest of society. So basically the individual effect of being a member of SMART can be quite large, but also by being an individual, there could be also other effects on society. For example, you start investing in other types of societal projects. Maybe some of you might, when they became a member of a cooperative, started investing also in an energy cooperative. We call that, well, that's a sort of behavior that is very direct, but there's also indirect effects. For example, what we call pro-social behavior. There's some studies which have looked at worker cooperatives in particular, whereby it turned out that people who are actively involved in democratic decision-making procedures within the worker cooperative were actually also more democratic in their behavior outside of the cooperative. They started engaging in politics, for example. So maybe the cooperative, and in particular the worker cooperative, and SMART in a way is a worker cooperative, can have also an effect in that way on what we call pro-social behavior, in behaving differently outside of your job as well. Of course, the bigger cooperative movement, and I guess you have noticed that there's a huge growth of the cooperative movement going on, not just in Belgium. Actually, in Belgium, it's going pretty slow. If you look at countries like Germany and the Netherlands, it's going a lot faster these days in many different sectors. In Belgium, it's mainly energy, and to some extent, a little bit of care and the mobility. But in countries like the Netherlands, for example, the growth in the care sector of cooperatives is enormous. Of course, that also has an effect on societal change. If the movement itself becomes greater, larger, then there's more innovation in that sector, and there's more pressure on the system as a whole to change. So, yes, I think we can assume there are some effects, both today but also in the past. For example, the emergence of the mutuals in the 19th century led to the emergence of our current social security system. So there are external effects, but maybe let's focus a bit on the internal effects of size. What happens if there's more members or less members? What happens with the cooperative internally? What kind of effect does this have on the members in their commitment, for example? If you have such a large cooperative like today, and you only see 1% showing up, what does that say about the commitment of the members? We can also have a look at what the composition of membership, we call that heterogeneity, the different backgrounds, does with the cooperative itself. It may lead to opportunities, but it can also lead to challenges. And what I will not tell you today, I will have a bit of an open ending. I hope you take that open ending with some food for thought towards the rest of the wonderful evening ahead of you. I will not tell you whether it's good or bad to be small or to be large, whatever, because it also depends on what you share as a resource. You share, for example, the means to organize yourself as self-employed, but other cooperatives, like energy cooperative, they share energy as a collective resource. So I will not tell you what's good or what is the ideal size. In the beginning of the day, some people referred to 12 as being the ideal size of a board. There's other theories that say, oh, you shouldn't be with more than 250 because that's all we can handle in our brain. Lots of theories out there, but they never take into account what the resource is as such. So I'm not going to tell you that, but I hope that what I'm going to tell you does help you to think about the relationship between the size of the cooperative you're a member of and, for example, your commitment. Now, just a little bit of history. I'm a historian by training, so I'm obliged to give you a little bit of history. If we go back very much in time, if we go back to the very early forms of cooperatives, for example, commons in agriculture, the guilds in craft in the early modern period, and then if we go a bit later on, we look at the earlier cooperatives, like in the 19th century, the emergence of the Raiffeisen banks, but also the mutuals, etc., that emerged. We see that they were growing as organizations in different ways. And today, there's yet another way. Very early forms in history, those commons, you've probably heard of the term commons, but also guilds, they always stayed small. They wanted to stay small. And instead of growing, they rather split up and formed a new organization. So when they found, like, we have too many members, then we're going to split up and form a new organization. So basically, you had a lot of small organizations, and none of them ever became very large. And they didn't really cooperate either. They worked for themselves, yeah? Now, what happened in the 19th century is that the government decided we don't want these organizations anymore, and they disappeared very rapidly because they had no defense strategy. Now, if you look at the cooperatives in the 19th century, like the ones you now know as Rabobank, for example, but Friesland Campina is another large one. There's some large banks, etc. They had another strategy. They decided to merge. In the first generation, so to speak, stayed small. The second generation, they constantly merged. They first, Friesland Campina, for example, is a nice example. At first, they merged a lot of farmers in Friesland, and then they went together with Campina, and now they're a huge dairy company, the 8th in the world. So they have a merger strategy. The problem there is, as a cooperative, it's okay to merge and to become larger, but it puts stress on how you cooperate internally. You lose a bit of that democratic decision-making together, yeah? Now, today we see something completely different, and actually Dirk van Sint-Jan also referred to that in his discussion on stage here. We see something else, a network strategy developing. So instead of merging and becoming large organizations, a lot of these cooperatives work together, form lobby groups together, like Coop, for example, in the energy sector. In the Netherlands, we have a number of other examples as well, like Nederland Zorgt voor elkaar. It's a sort of lobby network of care cooperatives, but we have others as well. And another thing we see is that growth is achieved by franchising. Franchising means that you have a model and that you try to replicate that model more or less all over the country. Yeah? Actually, SMART is also a bit of an example of franchising, but then on a national level. In the Netherlands, we see a franchising by the Herenboeren, for example. It's a cooperative farming system, but also mutual insurance for self-employed through the bread funds is growing by a franchising model. So, what makes all these organizations similar, and now we go to an even higher abstract level, is their way of governance, their way of organization. The reason you're together and you talk about cooperatives from agriculture to energy and anything in between is because you feel like we do things differently. It was said on stage here. We do things differently, but it's sometimes hard to put your finger on it. So let's try to do that. What these organizations do, and what is a fundamental aspect of the cooperative, is that you start from a collectivity of members with a specific need. And you create a collectivity of resources. And that part is often forgotten. It's really about a collectivity of resources. You have units of the resource together, but it's still a collectivity of the group. Yeah? The services that SMART offers are, you can benefit from them individually, but together they are one large resource that you can only access if you're a member of SMART. Now, we all know that if you ask people to work together, it's sometimes difficult. And if you ask them to govern a resource collectively with a group, it's often a problem as well. So that what emerges then is what we call a social dilemma. It's a choice between your own short-term benefits and the long-term benefits of the group. It's a choice we had to make a lot of times during the pandemic, but it's a choice that cooperatives actually prefer to make. They decide to have a problem. We work together, hence we create a problem, but we also know a way to solve it. And that's basically the secret of cooperatives, that you have a way to solve it, and that way is called institutions, but in practice it's about common rules, it's about common agreements, it's norms, values. If you would do an exercise here about what you find important in terms of values, a lot of you would probably agree on specific values. And the chances are that a lot of those values or a lot of the principles that you work on come down to utility, the use that you have out of the resource you have collectively here. So access to administration for you, for example. But it's also about social equity, having access to democratic decision-making processes. And it's also about efficiency, about organizing yourself with these collective resources together more efficiently than doing it on your own, but also efficiently within the organization. So those are a bit the principles that are important to keep a cooperative alive in the long run. But it's principles. Yeah, I was just talking about values. We need something more. We need to know what makes the cooperative really going when it comes down to values. Now, then it's all about reciprocity, solidarity, and sufficiency. And sufficiency is, of course, a very important one, and to take not more than you need. Reciprocity is about bringing, but also taking from the cooperative. And solidarity, I think that's a very key element here in SMART to keep this cooperative running. Now, I want to talk a bit more about the pink bulb and what happens when it grows, and in particular also what it does with reciprocity, what happens. So in the beginning I said it really matters whether, what happens with the size of your cooperative for various reasons. Because the cooperative really needs reciprocal behavior. Do ut des, you could say, or bringing and taking, but in equal measures. So if you have more members, there's more opportunities for reciprocity because there's more people you can exchange with. And there's also more people who can bring. But there's also more people who can free ride. And free riding can happen in many different ways. So we shouldn't just talk about size, about the total number, but also the way in which people behave. It's not just about how many people behave in a specific, within a cooperative, but also what they actually do within a cooperative. What's the quality of their cooperation? How do they see the balance between giving and taking to the cooperative? And sometimes it's actually a very difficult exercise to figure out what really happens within a cooperative, how many people bring and how much do they take in return. And sometimes people come in a cooperative and take more from the cooperative than others. And that's often because they have different needs over time. Now, what we also see is that there is a huge difference between cooperatives in how the time window between bringing and taking takes place. For example, imagine an energy cooperative like EcoPower. I'm a member of EcoPower myself. When I paid my share to EcoPower, basically the day after that, I could get electricity from EcoPower. So the time window between bringing and taking is very short. Yeah? There's really no time in between. It's very rapidly, I know what my benefits of my cooperative membership are. So it's not so hard to convince people of it. And in fact, these days, it's even impossible to become a member of EcoPower, some of you might have noticed, simply because all of a sudden, a lot of people who are not a member yet realized it's actually a smart thing to do, because EcoPower is not dependent on the world market prices for energy, so in the end, they don't have to charge their members that much for the energy as other companies have. So they've recently introduced a stop on the members because they realized if their size would grow massively, then they could not give back anymore to the members, or all the members would have suffered from the huge size of the cooperative. So size really matters there, even if there's that small time window. But in other cooperatives like SMART or the bread funds in the Netherlands, the time window can be completely different. In SMART, for example, you can be a member, get immediate services from SMART, but you can also be a sort of passive member. And a lot of the 99% of those who are not here are people who became a member but never used the services of SMART. So they do contribute, but they do not take from the cooperative. And sometimes they are also not really dependent on SMART. And that's really a bit of a weak spot, I think, that if you're an independent worker and you become a member of SMART, a lot of people also have, for example, another side job for which they have Social Security as a wage laborer themselves. So they're not really dependent, so the commitment doesn't have to be that large towards SMART. That's also probably why a lot of people do become a member, but don't really actively use it, so don't really engage in the cooperative. The bread funds in the Netherlands, it's a sort of mutual fund for sickness of self-employed who do not get covered anymore by the government. They have an even totally different time window. If you become a member there, you contribute. Interesting. You contribute, but in the best case, you never get anything back from that organization because you don't want to get sick. You don't want the benefits. But in case you get sick, you do want the benefits. So it's a bit of a difference. So when we talk about cooperatives, we also have to think about the type of resource they offer and what that does with reciprocity. So it's not easy to say, yes, it's good to be large or it's better to be small. Now, just to give you some food for thought about what could happen if you become larger, if you have membership growth, but of course we know it doesn't mean active membership growth. It does mean that you can have more continuity due to more critical mass. And we've seen that, for example, with EcoPower, they talked about that today as well. They were capable of putting pressure on the market, the energy market. They now represent 2% of the energy consumption in Belgium. Not much, but they did change quite a bit because of their critical mass. They have a lot of members all over the country. The interesting there too is that the more members you have, the more opportunities for direct investment through your members. So members, they might invest themselves, but they also might attract other people from their family or friends, or fools, as they say, who are willing to invest in the cooperative as well. So there's opportunities there if you grow. On the other hand, you also get heterogeneity growing. The more people you have in a room, the higher the chance that they start differing in different ways. And you all have a fairly similar profile as self-employed, but some of you are in the art sector, some are in a totally different sector, or making websites, and different types of occupations, so different types of needs. That has pros and cons. The advantage of it is that you have different needs, and you might, as such, not have to rely on the cooperative all at the same time. Some of you might be very active in the summer and have a lot of administration in the summer, but others might have more winter job, and they might need smart more in the winter time. So there can be a spread of a demand towards smart, and that makes it easier for smart to deal with all the requests for help. Another thing which is often forgotten in case of cooperatives is that it's very important to try to achieve intergenerational spread. So making sure that you have people from different generations in the cooperative. Why is that? Because different generations have different demands. So people have different needs. They rely on the cooperative at different moments in time and at different moments through their life. So that's really important. I think within SMART, a lot of it is concentrated within, of course, the working population, logic, but it's probably also skewed in some ways towards specific ages. I didn't study it, but it would be interesting to see. That's the opportunities when you're large. But of course, you also have to take those opportunities. On the other hand, there's also some downsides to being or becoming large. And one of them is what we call the iron law of Michels. So early 20th century political scientist who noticed that the growth of organization leads to more bureaucracy, to more red tape. And I guess that's also something that you get in organizations sometimes like SMART, that if you want to organize internally an internal democracy, it takes a lot of, it takes a lot of organization. What also happens that you get a tendency towards subgroups, factions. So people organize on the basis of things they do see being similar within their group. For example, all the artists would work together, but also the web designers would form a group. And that might lead to diverging interests and internal conflicts. There's also more variety in expectations. And we see that, for example, in energy cooperatives, like EcoPower, we recently done a study which shows that the original members really went in there out of a sort of ideological reflex. We want renewable energy. And whether it costs or not, we're willing to pay more, but we just want that renewable energy. That has totally changed with the newer generations who go in there, but seek for a more balance between the costs and, the environmental opportunities that it offers. So there's differences in expectations you have to take into account. The larger you become, the more different expectations. So you need to do some expectation management there. Luckily, there's a lot of experimentation being done within SMART. I've heard quite a few people here who have been parts of specific committees within smart. I don't oversee all the internal democratic instruments here. And I can tell that there's a lot of work being done here in trying to achieve that or optimize that internal democracy. Of course, it's always a difficult exercise, especially if you can't involve everyone within the group. But I think all the practical workshops today also showed that there's a lot of interest in moving ahead together, and that the future is bright, I think. I will leave it to this. It's a bit, oh, that is it indeed. It's a bit of a university talk, I guess, but if you have any questions or suggestions, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tina. Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup. Ne quittez pas encore.
Thank you, Tina. So still a couple of seconds before having a short 15-minute break before the formal GA.